My guest today has been a previous guest on Radnor Studio 21. He's attorney Richard Booker, commissioner of Ward 2 in Radnor Township. I want to first say that the opinions expressed here today are those of attorney Richard Booker, not those of myself or any of the producers of Radnor Studio 21 or any of its board members. With that, I say, Rich, thanks for coming back on.
Good to see you.
You've been on the show before, and we've enjoyed some good conversation. The first thing I want to ask you was about the most recent letter that came out from the Ethics Board, is it?
No, the most recent thing that came out was a meritless and baseless complaint filed by the Radnor Democratic Committee to two folks named Doug McCone and Mr. Beaudre have filed a complaint, a baseless complaint against me that was really a political attack. So with respect to that complaint, what I'd like to say on your show, John, is this. The allegations contained in the complaint are false. The substance of the complaint is ridiculous, and the materials provided in the complaint contain confidential ethics board testimony from the police chief, Colarulo, which must have been improperly obtained. The confidential material I'm referring to could only have been obtained from someone on the board or the township administration, and its presence in the complaint shows that the Radnor Democratic Committee colluded directly with one or more members of the board, or possibly someone in the administration or others, to prepare this meritless political attack on me at election time.
You said the complaint is meritless, but for the viewers, they may not know some of the contents of the complaint. Could you say though what they are?
Well, the contents of the complaint are trumped up charges of it's really multiple items, including an item that brings my son into play. So, for example, one of the items that they talk about is favoritism for my son. Now, if you look at this document, which is actually the document I'm referring to, which was illegally leaked to the Radnor Democratic Committee to prepare this complaint, this is testimony from the police chief to the ethics board. This is confidential ethics board materials. No one has seen this. This has never been published, and it showed up in the complaint by McCone and Beaudre that was given to the newspaper. This complaint talks about my son calling for a accident report. So here's what happened. My son, back in February of 2017, was hit on Lancaster Avenue. His car was damaged. He lives now, he's moved out, he lives in Berwyn, and he has a place there. His car was damaged. He needed to get a copy of the accident report so he could file his claim, get the car fixed. He called the office, he called Radnor Township, and was told he had to come down. He had no car. He had to come down, pay $15, and that would take 5 to 10 days. My son said, I shouldn't have to pay $15. It wasn't my fault, this accident. I just need the report to get the claim. And the woman he talked to at the township building said, well, do you know anybody in the office? And my son said, my dad is commissioner. At that point, the woman who's taking the call put him on hold, and she went to the police chief to get direction. And the chief, what she writes is, the chief told me to have Richard Booker, the son, call his dad and have his dad call him, meaning Colarulo, and speak with him directly, and that he would release the report to him free of charge. She then went back to her desk and told that to my son, who was on hold. My son then said, I don't want to do that. It doesn't concern him. My son said, hey, my dad's got nothing to do with this. And she again repeated. She says, I repeated to him, the chief wants you to call your dad and have your dad call him, and your report will then be released. This was the chief telling the woman on the phone to tell that to my son. My son then did call me. We got a copy of the report, and now it shows up here as an ethical violation. when it was actually those people who told him what to do to get that report. So this gives you an example of the tawdry, the meritless, the baseless claims that are in this complaint. They've been detailed. People can take a look at it, but they're false. And what I will say is that we need to find out who is responsible for turning over the confidential information from the ethics board hearing that was conducted of Elaine Paul Schaefer in her ethics board. So this testimony came out of the ethics board review of Elaine Paul Schaefer's ethical conduct. But somebody took that private confidential information, then leaked it to the Democratic committee and Messrs. Beaudre and McCone. But I believe this complaint will be withdrawn. It's been improperly and illegally submitted, and it is meritless. In addition, I will be taking all legal action available to me to bring those responsible for this reprehensible conduct to justice. So I plan to sue individually the people who are responsible for this and for improperly placing this complaint.
And obviously believe that this was just because you're running for political office.
It's right. This is an election ploy.
Yeah,
this is a few weeks away from the election, so that's what this is, and it's purely a political attack and baseless.
Well, I will say that this is my opinion. What I'm going to say. I think it's unfortunate that the situation that's happened with the two of the commissioners board, with the president and Bill Spengler. Is unfortunate because it deteriorates the confidence that the community has in its Board of Commissioners. And you've been a guest on here before at my request. Mm-hmm. And Lou Clark is a biweekly guest of mine, mm-hmm. and I enjoy having you on here. And I also would enjoy any Democrats that would like to come on the show as well. But it's just unfortunate because you've had two unfortunate circumstances, and it appears as though people are. Not you, I'm not seeing it with you, but it looks like people are throwing hand grenades.
There's no question,
and
John.
That's not good.
And we've had the last two board presidents have been cited for felony criminal activity. And what I will say is that, there's a corruption and there's a criminal element in the Radnor Democratic Committee that we need to address. This type of activity, these kind of baseless claims as a political ploy, are just one more example of it. But as you're aware, and as you reference, the Democratic president of the Board of Commissioners, Phil R., his house was raided on September 21st of this year, and that subsequently we found out that he was involved, and he admitted to, apparently, to the police, multiple counts of felony child pornography counts. Now, the element of this that's important is that Phil R. has not yet resigned from the board. Phil R. actually was claimed to have been presiding over the ethics board hearing in absentia, so he wasn't there. He hasn't been anywhere. Nobody's heard of anything from him since September 21st. Yet on October 12th, apparently, he was present enough at the ethics board to participate and to preside over that hearing, which ultimately found that there was no probable cause for the ethics complaints against Elaine Paul Schaefer. Now, what's important about that? And what's important about that is on October 9th, Monday, October 9th, our last meeting, I made a motion to replace Phil Ayer as president of the Board of Commissioners. Not to remove him from the Board of Commissioners. We don't have the power to remove him from the Board of Commissioners. He can resign, but we can't remove him. But we could replace him as president. And Phil R. had not been to a meeting. We had not heard from him since September 21st. So by October 9th, it's obvious that he's not going to return. Furthermore, on September 21st, all the commissioners, we had been briefed on the nature of the raid on his house and the nature of the charges that were pending. And we had also been made aware that there really was no mistake as to this. So by October 9th, I made a perfectly reasonable and legitimate motion to replace Phil Ayer as president so that we could carry on the business of the board. That motion was blocked 3-3 by Elaine Paul Schaefer, John Nagel, and Jim Higgins. So it was a purely partisan vote where the Democrats blocked the replacement of Phil R. 2 days later, on October the 11th, the charges and the arrest came against Phil R. And the press release from Jack Whelan, the district attorney, was graphic and complete and contained an admission from Phil R. himself. So, nonetheless, he still has not resigned, and nonetheless, despite all of that, he was able to so-called participate in the ethics board hearing and to again find that there were no probable cause to move forward to Elaine. So Elaine had needed him to be on that board because the president of the board has to participate in the ethics board proceedings. So I objected to that. I continue to object to that. I continue to believe that the 7th Ward of Radnor is not currently represented. We have no current president of the Board of Commissioners, and I do expect that once again, this issue will be raised on our October 23rd meeting, and we will then attempt to replace Phil R. as president of the Board of Commissioners. So I expect that vote to occur then. But query, why, what has changed? Nothing has changed, so perhaps the Democrats will block it again, but I suspect that now that they feel that they need to vote to remove him as president because of the graphic and complete nature and the public nature of the charges that are against him.
Well, wasn't the reason for the postponement because there wasn't a proper posting, a time posting of 5 days, or I think it's 5.
Yeah,
is that correct?
That was they call a special meeting, but they didn't put enough time. But again, we didn't need a special meeting. We did the motion on Monday the 9th. They voted it down on the 9th, and they cited, oh, he's not been proven guilty. He's still not proven guilty. There's still charges. He was defended by all 3 of the Democrats on the Board of Commissioners. He was also defended by Doug McCone and others who said that he should not be asked to step down from the presidency. But again, the Board of Commissioners, Doug McCone might not have known, the public might not have known, but the Board of Commissioners, we knew on October 9th the nature of the investigation and raid on his house and the nature of the charges. We didn't know details. We didn't know when it was going to be arrested. But we did have some information, certainly enough to make the call. And the Democrats on the Board of Commissioners decided to protect what we now found out is Phil R., who's been charged with multiple counts of felony child pornography.
I don't expect you to know the answer to this question, but is there someone on the board who's close enough to him that they could say, Phil, for the benefit of the board, it's good that you resign your position? Is there? And I don't expect you to know that answer. If you say I don't know or no, then I understand and we move on.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. My suspicion is, my guess is, I don't know this to be, but my guess is that the Radnor Democrat committee actually asked him to stay on. Again, they needed him to participate and to be part of the Board of Commissioners through Elaine's ethics board hearing and decision. If he had resigned before that determination, they could not have proceeded because the president of the Board of Commissioners needs to be on the ethics board. Now, again, my view is that Phil R. has not been on the Board of Commissioners. He has been de facto not participating. He has not. No one has talked to him that I know of. It's other than the chief. The police might have talked to him, but again, my view is that they probably asked him to stay, and now that hearing is over, now they're saying we want him to resign, but he has not yet resigned. And what I'm told is that Phil R. might be using his resignation from the Board of Commissioners as a bargaining chip to help lessen the charges against him. That's reprehensible.
Who controls the ethics board?
The ethics board is an advisory board. It has 4 members plus the board president. And It's not controlled by the Board of Commissioners. It's independent advisory board, and they have separate counsel. But again, the important part with the Ethics Board is that in the charter, it requires the president of the Board of Commissioners to participate,
Right.
because that's the commissioner's representative on that board. The president of the Board of Commissioners presumably has 4 votes and was got the majority support of the majority of the Board of Commissioners. They are supposed to participate as we determine if there's any ethical infractions. The Board of Commissioners has not been represented on the Ethics Board since September 21st. The 7th Ward of our township has not been represented since September 21st. And we have yet another instance of criminal behavior. We first had Spengler, who was also charged last week with multiple counts of assault on his 103-year-old mother-in-law. And now, that same week, we have these charges, child pornography charges against Phil R. It's a sad time for Radnor Township. It's an embarrassment for Radnor Township, and I had tried to mitigate that by at least not having Phil Ayer be the president of the board when these charges came through. But instead, what do we get? President of the board charged with multiple counts of child pornography. It could have been just, at least it didn't have to be that. I tried to mitigate what I could, and I was blocked in doing so for political purposes. And then we get this retaliatory ethics charge against me. It's as you say, it's a sad state of affairs. We need new leadership. Yeah. We need to reform the board and to really start to concentrate on the business of the people instead of this petty political bickering.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Daily News, which I coincidentally saw the day he was arrested, referred to him as a Radnor big shot.
Radnor big shot. That's
right. It's not my quote. It's the Daily News.
He is the highest elected, position in Radnor Township. So I think that counts as a big shot. And again, at least we could have not had him be president, but again, they wouldn't hear of it. Yeah, sounds because of the ethics board here.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about there? I want to ask you some things about Ward 2. What obstacles are you experiencing in Ward 2 that you need to overcome?
Well, the biggest obstacle that we have in Ward 2, I believe right now, is traffic. We have major issues with traffic in our neighborhoods, people cutting through. So the 2nd Ward of Radnor...
That was in that complaint too, by the way. I read that complaint. The stop signs?
Stop signs. Yeah, oh, yeah, stop signs.
I feel compelled to bring it up.
One of the things that we have issues with is Pine Tree Road. There's been a lot of controversy. That Pine Tree Road is a big cut-through road. People use King of Prussia Road, Pine Tree, and others to get from King of Prussia down to the Blue Route. These are people from all over the area, from the office parks that are off of Warner Road and Sweetsford Road. And that's what I believe is causing a lot of this traffic from the King of Prussia Mall is coming down from Radnor. And my ward, the 2nd Ward, is at the very northern tip of Radnor. So Radnor is kind of a diamond, right? And my ward is at the very top of the diamond. We are the tip of the iceberg, is what I say. But we tend to get a lot of people coming from King of Prussia who don't want to get onto the Schuylkill Expressway at King of Prussia, and there's a lot of traffic there. We see more and more trucks and other people, commuters, traveling south through Croton Road to either King of Prussia Road or Arden Road and some of these others, and cutting through Pine Tree and some of the other King of Prussia Road. We see a lot of this kind of traffic through the neighborhoods. It's very disturbing to the people in those neighborhoods who had always had a very bucolic kind of green suburban place where people like to walk on the streets.
Sure.
And it's really been impossible to do that lately. And we see it more and more in the neighborhoods with more and more traffic. So the constituents have asked for a variety of traffic measures, and part of what was in that complaint was me being an advocate for my constituents who wanted to have a stop sign. That's what we wanted. We wanted a stop sign, and I was vociferously arguing for my constituents and for my constituents' views, and demanding that we that we listen to our community. And I asked that we have a stop sign and consider it, and ultimately it was refused by the bureaucracy in Radnor Township, including the traffic engineer, who said that it didn't meet the warrants. There's certain warrants for a stop sign is what we call it, at sight, distance, traffic, speeds. So the warrants were not met, so they refused to do that ultimately. But that's what that was. It was not me directing anybody to do anything improper, but directing that the township follow through and legally put in stop signs that we wanted. We never got the stop signs. What we did get was a higher cost alternative that is traffic islands. Turned out to be controversial, and the people have informed me and the rest of the Board of Commissioners they don't want those, so we're going to remove those. But we still have that issue, and that's what you refer to. In addition to that, we have other big issues, and I talked about this on your show last year. What we have is called the Planned Laboratory Office zoning, which only is in the Second Ward.
It's on King of Prussia Road.
King of Prussia Road and Matson Ford. It's those office complexes that are there, and including 145 King of Prussia Road, which is now owned by Penn. Penn and certain others on the board want to change the law to allow Penn to build a hospital. And that hospital will generate a huge amount of traffic that will go on King of Prussia Road. And so this is another battle that what I don't want to do is to change our law for a favored constituency that will dump thousands of new cars onto King of Prussia Road, who will also then be going through our neighborhoods and adding to this already very difficult traffic situation that we have in the northern side of Radnor. Further, my view is that this is something that is disenfranchising to my voters, because the other commissioners do not have PLO zoning in their wards. PLO zoning only affects the Second Ward. So when we have 5 or 6 commissioners all joining to change the law on PLO zoning, they're only doing it to change the law in my ward for my neighborhoods and my constituents. No one else is directly affected in the same way, and it's really disenfranchising my people. It's typically in Philadelphia and others, any changes that only affect one ward need the approval of that representative, and we should have that rule as well, but that's not a formal rule. And then finally, I'm battling this PLO change because two of the commissioners are leaving the board at the end of December. Don Curley and Elaine Paul Schaefer are not running again. They will be off the board, and we should not push through this type of major change in our law for Penn or this favored constituency, which will affect a great number of people in my ward with people who are going off the board in just a few weeks. But one more issue, this PLO zoning amendment has not been reviewed, and the review has not been, the comments that have been made on that by the Planning Commission are not going to be considered by the Board of Commissioners. So we have a change in law, a zoning amendment. The Planning Commission for the Township, Radnor Township Planning Commission, did have some comments on it, as well as the Delaware County Planning Commission. Those comments were made several months ago and will be ignored and not considered so that we can push through this PLO before these two leave the board. So that's the plan right now. I'm hoping that I can stop this from occurring so we can tap the brakes on this change in law, and that we can have a full and honest look at this. And I'm very confident, and I've shown, and I continue to show, this will be detrimental to my neighborhoods. And I'm hoping that we can get this at least held up so that we can review and have a thorough, comprehensive review of all the implications, and not rush through this massive change in legislation in the last few weeks of 2017 before these two people leave the Board of Commissioners.
Is Penn pressing you for this?
Oh, yes. Penn is pressuring. Penn has agreed. What held this up was Penn had said well, we're exempt. We're not going to pay tax on this site. And I was able to convince everyone that, yes, Penn likely would not pay tax on this, and we can't give them a change of law so that they can do a new use and then take the property exempt. We were able to, everyone did agree with me, council agreed with me.
Well, there's a first.
Right, that's the first time, the only time. John Rice will say, "Oh, I agreed with you on the tax issue." That's right, he did. And so it was held up for several months. Now apparently Penn has said, "Well, we're going to do what's called it's a financial transaction that's something similar to what we had, these collateralized debt obligations." Remember the 2008 crash? This is the kind of financial engineering. It's called a sale leaseback, where Penn would actually sell this to a third party taxable and then lease back a portion of it. And it said, well, we'll pay taxes as long as we own the property and don't sell it. But a sale leaseback is typically a financing structure where what I've used it for in my business is as prior tax director for Sunoco, we would use it when we wanted to monetize an asset. You can sell the asset, then pay rent on it over a period of years, take a deduction, and yet still have the cash. That's generally how you use it. So, but we always set it up so that you can unwind it under certain situations, or you can always transfer your interest and get out of it. And there's also sometimes in the accounting law, they don't recognize these transactions because they are viewed as illusory or fake, or they're just paper transactions. So they're not always recognized. So there's certain accounting provisions that require that. So my point with this is that even if Penn does a sale leaseback, they might pay taxes for a year or two, or they might for a little longer, but they are always able to unwind it if they want to, and they will always be able to sell their interest to Mainline Health or someone else. If they do, once they build this hospital, if they sell the hospital a year or two or three later, Mainline Health, if they bought it, they would come in and immediately want to take that exempt. And they would likely win. So while Penn right now is saying they will pay taxes, my view is, and the view of counsel that has advised me on this, is that there's no way to ensure that this is a permanent condition. And so for all of those reasons, I'm against changing our law and changing the PLO to accommodate Penn. And I'm asking the Board of Commissioners to tap the brakes, to slow down, and to not even take this up until we have a new board seated in January 2018, which we have an election in just 3 weeks or so. So we'll know the direction from there. Does that make sense?
Yes, best I could understand. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but that's fine. It's fine. No, I don't understand all the accounting terms and those complications, but I understand just from the naked eye looking at what Penn wants to do, and King of Prussia Road to me makes no sense. The traffic itself makes no sense without certain restrictions.
It makes sense to Penn because they want to have this hospital there, and they think it's a good location, and it may be a good location. I'm not saying that it's not. What I'm saying is that the infrastructure, the neighborhoods, can't accommodate it, and the law doesn't provide for it. I'm happy to have Penn build whatever they want to build there. Just comply with the law that we have today. Right now, my view is that it's set up for about 267,000 square feet of office space, and I would encourage them to do that, and they can get an approval and move right away. But that's not what they want to do. They want the law changed. They want to build a hospital. They want to build 475,000 square feet, a 2,000 parking garage, and they want to build a huge complex there. And they want us to change the law to allow them to do it. And I'm hopeful that we can tap the brakes and really take a close look at this, because I don't want to just turn that over to them, and don't see the need to do it.
Well, and then there's the tax implication. I mean, it's that's the taxes that what bothers me is if that's going to affect Radnor citizens because they get a tax break. Well, I'm not in favor of that either.
No question.
So do you want to talk about some nice things?
Sure.
Okay. The Radnor Life and Style magazine. You're on the cover with your your wife and your daughter.
Yes.
And you're all dapper. First thing I think overcoming adversity, which is part of the magazine. Let's talk about that, because we have your family tree, which you have framed in your family room.
Yes, yes. So this article right here on Radnor Life and Style is a nice thing that we put together. I was asked by the magazine to put together an article, and we took some nice pictures. The real title of this article was called "Things That Bind Us." That's what my title was, "Things That Bind Us," and the article starts this way: God is first, my family second, I am third. And that's the quote from the old Gail Sayers famous book called I Am Third, and it was the inspiration of the movie Brian's Song, if you remember that.
I do.
With
I do.
James Caan as Brian Piccolo.
Yeah.
Great movie. And that sentiment, God is first, my family and friends are second, I am third, is what I strive to keep in my heart every day as I live my life. And this article talks about how that influences my life and my family, and how it recognizes the differences in race relations, and how much we can learn from that movie and from what happened in the past. So people who know Brian's Song, it's Gail Sayers, who's black running back, star running back for the Bears, and then Brian Piccolo, who was also running back, and they were roommates, and this was in the 1960s. And it talks about how there was animosity at first, but then how they became best friends and relied on each other as Gail Sayers fought back from a near career-ending injury, and then ultimately Brian Piccolo died from lung cancer.
Yeah.
And though that story and that movie I thought was a great movie from the time I was a kid, and hopefully you remember that.
And he was from Brian Piccolo was from the South too, I think.
I think
he
yeah.
went to a Southern college,
Yep.
as far as I can remember.
Right, and that's what made it so unique in the 60s, in the late 60s, that you'd have these as roommates and that these guys would end up being friends. Well, for my family, my parents were of different racial backgrounds. My mother was from the main line, WASP from the main line here, and my father, his family was, actually they lived in Detroit, but his old family was from Alabama, from the Deep South, and further back from Virginia, and descended from slaves. So my parents had to deal with a lot of that same type of thing from the 60s.
Sure.
And they were married in 1960, 61, and I was born shortly thereafter.
It was illegal in some states for people of different races to get married to each other.
That was before Virginia v. Loving was the
Yeah.
case at the time. So what this article talks about is those connections, those issues, and how much we can learn from each other. And I think of myself as really just a truly American person. My family on my mother's side is descended from the Mayflower. So I'm a 12th generation descendant from Edward Fuller, who came on the Mayflower, who signed the Mayflower Compact, and who was a pilgrim. Edward Fuller died the first winter in 1620, and so did his wife. But his son lived and was raised by his uncle, and it was a good thing because 13 generations later, that's where I'm here. On my father's side, his family came from. They lived in Detroit, where they moved in the 40s at wartime to get work. They moved from the South. They had lived in Louisiana and Alabama before that. And I've traced my father's side of the family into Alabama as early as 1850, and then in Virginia from about 1816. So looking at this, my father's side I believe is descended from slaves, and my mother's family is descended from Mayflower. I'm a Mayflower.
Oppressed people themselves, actually.
I'm a Mayflower descendant. Yeah, the Pilgrims were oppressed in England. They were oppressed in England. That's why they went to Holland and then ultimately came on what was it was really a holy quest to the New World.
Yeah, for religious freedom.
For religious freedom.
One of the things that I periodically, when I'm joking with you, I call you Rains.
Oh, yeah.
And he is, Rains Booker is on your family tree.
Rains Booker was hung in 1831 in Virginia, in southern Virginia, Southampton County. Rains Booker was hung because he was identified as being at one of the meeting locations at a church with Nat Turner. Nat Turner had led a rebellion in 1832 and he led a slave rebellion in Southern Virginia in 1832. And Nat Turner rebellion had ended up, there was 54 people who were killed by the slave uprising. They're all the white plantation owners in the town. And Nat Turner was ultimately executed. Rains Booker was owned by one of the slave owners there and was hung shortly after Nat Turner because he had been identified as being at the church with Nat Turner. I don't know that he was involved with the massacre that happened, but he was identified, and they hung everybody who was even close. So there was 50, I think I looked at the all the Nat Turner legal proceedings, and I think that there was 54 people who were white who were killed, and then Nat Turner, and there was over 60 slaves and black people that were then executed. Some numbers like that, but
Sure.
It was something like that. So it was a horrendous event in 1632. My great grandfather was Pompey Booker. Pompey Booker was born in Virginia in about 1816, and the old family lore is that they were sold down the river to Alabama, and by 1850 they were in Alabama. I don't have any proof of why that they were sent out of Virginia, but it could have been that this was Rains Booker's son and his mother that were sent in 1832 after that event, after the Nat Turner. So the son, my guess is, would not have been, well, that's not I don't have a guess on it. It appears that it could be the case that although the father was hung, they didn't want to hang a 16-year-old boy and his mother, so they sent them down to Alabama. And my family, it was then from Pompey to Booker to Thomas Booker in Alabama. Thomas, his son was William J., and then my father, Kermit. So I don't have any proof that that's the case, but Pompey Booker was in Virginia, born in Virginia in 1816, according to my studies, and ends up in Alabama in 1850. And so in Alabama, my father's family was in Alabama from 1850 until the early part of the 20th century, and then they moved to
Detroit.
They moved to Louisiana and then to Detroit around wartime, World War II.
Just briefly, how did your parents meet? I mean, your mother's a mainline white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and how does she come to know your father?
She comes to know my father because my mother met her. My mother was an artist, an art student, and she went to University of Michigan. So my mother, originally from just a few miles east of here in Rosemont, Montgomery County, off of Airedale Road. We used to live on Wendover Road, my grandmother. So it's close to, it's off of Airedale, but it's just in Montgomery County. My mother she went to Penn to start at her undergrad. And my mother went to Baldwin, and then she went to Lower Merion, and then went to Penn. And she hated taking the train in and out of town to go to college. And she begged and was able to finally get approval, and she transferred to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. My father was also an artist and was also studying art at the time, and was the first in his family, and he was also able to go to University of Michigan, and that's where they met, at University of Michigan, as art students.
So they probably had to meet in a clandestine way.
Yeah, a certain extent. I remember my mother saying that they would never go to a movie; they would only go to drive-in movies. Right. Right. She would say, "Oh, he would never take me to a movie because it was probably because it was too uncomfortable."
Yeah, considering all the pressures, it must have been true love for sure. Without a doubt.
Well, sure, but by 1969 they were divorced. The stress was too much, and that's when I came back to live here with my grandparents, and we lived and so I've been in the main line in this area since then.
Well, the article further goes on, and page 50 of the article, I think, it talks about your relationship with your family, your wife, and your 3 children.
That's right. My boys are recently graduated from college. My oldest graduated from University of Alabama, so he went to Alabama. Roll Tide, and he graduated. And what he does now is he leases apartments, and so he's in the leasing business. My other son is in finance major from Temple, graduated from Temple Fox School of Business, and works for Vanguard. And my daughter is a senior at Radnor High School this year. And she is one of the captains of the color guard, so she is expert at throwing the rifle. She can throw the rifles and the sabers, and she throws them and catches them, and it's dance. Really, it's a kind of a dance. It's the dance troupe with the band. So my daughter does that. She does dance and color guard, and she's a star, and she's great. She's just look at the picture. She's a model.
Yeah.
Right.
On the cover.
Just like my wife.
Yep. Right on the cover.
That's right.
Right on the cover.
Right on the. Right on the cover. So, this is a very nice article and a very nice thing that we have here for Radnor Township and the official magazine, and I'm very glad to participate. And Patty and I also talk about in this article our involvement with the Radnor Memorial Library. Patty was on the library board for 9 years, and I currently am chair of the standing committee for the Board of Commissioners for the library board. And the library is very close to this building here where we are.
Right next door to us.
Right next door. And we're working on our brand new library, $7 million expansion and reconstruction of the library, and should be done shortly. It varies depending on what the contractors are saying right now, but could be at this winter, the end of 2017, or maybe early 2018. But it's going to be a great new facility, and the library is more than just a place for books. The library is really kind of a community center for people, for seniors, for kids, for teens. People meet there. And people, they talk to each other. They have a chance to socialize. And there's going to be a cafe area as well as an expansion of the books and the holdings that we'll have there. So it should be a beautiful new facility, and hopefully something that we can all be proud of. And again, my wife and I have been part of the library and the library board for many years. So that's one of the areas that we participate in and give back to the community through our involvement.
One of the parts of the article that I read was about your taste in music.
Okay.
I have to ask you, are you really a Carpenters fan?
Oh, we love the Carpenters. We love my wife loves the Carpenters and loves it.
I'm sorry.
I got the CD.
We've only
for
just
Christmas.
begun.
Oh, we only just begun. My wife, she knows every word, and Karen Carpenter.
Well, tragically died.
She tragically died
Yes.
from she was anorexic and
Yeah.
bulimia, and she died in her 30s, and it was so iconic for my wife growing up as a kid in the 70s, and she loved the Carpenters. So. So one of the best gifts I've ever gotten from my wife for Christmas is a Carpenter CD, and she just loves it. And it's so good. The music, I mean, they sing so well. And Karen and Richard Carpenter, what they did was they overdubbed. So Richard Carpenter was an expert at overdubbing and that record. So all those voices, all of that background to the Carpenters is all just them, track after track after track after track of their voices. And it makes it a chorus, and it's so full, and it was so unique and revolutionary at the time. So
Well, he was a talented engineer.
A talented engineer and
writer.
a super talented
Yeah.
pianist and musician.
And writer.
And Karen Carpenter was a great drummer.
Yes, I know. That's right. She did.
She played the drums.
I'm a macho guy, so I can say this. And here's this macho guy with his really fat red Porsche, listening to the Carpenters.
Well, I mean, my wife loves it, and
And you do it for her.
I remember, I'm on the top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can't find.
You're a singer as well.
That was so. I mean, the thing that time was just so iconic, and that was. It's just so uplifting, when you remember those times.
Yeah, well,
when I was a kid.
For me, it was disco.
Yeah,
For me,
John Travolta. I guess with a white suit. You get the white shirt, white black shirt, and the white suit.
It's all black now. For me. It's slimming. Black is slimming. You're a really talented guy, and you really have a very, very interesting background, and I enjoy having you on the show. You're a fiery guy. You're really spirited. You're a firecracker, and I really enjoy you coming on all the time. You're always a welcome guest here.
Well, thank you, and I wish I was on more. I don't do a regular show like Luke does, and I often say, I want to do a regular show.
Well, Luke has celebrity status.
Yeah, he's celebrity, and he's also his ward is in Wayne, and mine's really not quite in Wayne. But what I would say is, I have been part of the area for almost my whole life, and I was always on the wrestling team, and as a wrestler from the time I was 5 years old through Temple. So I wrestled Division I wrestling, and one of the things that you have to be as a wrestler is tenacious. You have to never give up, and you have to battle.
And you have to be a good tactician.
And you have to be a good tactician because there's a move, there's a counter. There's a counter to the counter, there's a counter to the counter to the counter. And that's where I derive a lot of my personality. That's what I've done my whole life, and that's why I never give up. That's why I won't let the constituents down. I'll never stop fighting for the constituents. I don't fight. I'm not out for myself. I'm not out for the developers. I'm not out for the bureaucrats. I'm not out for the public employee unions. I'm not out for the 501c3s that run Radnor Studio 21. I want to help whatever I can. I'm here to represent the constituents. I'm here to represent the people of Radnor and Radnor's Second Ward. And I will always battle for the taxpayers, for the constituents, so that individuals' voices are heard. Because a lot of people, they don't think their voices are heard in government. And they're always told, you can't fight City Hall. Well, that's what I do. I am here to be the voice of the constituents, to be their voice in the government. We don't always win, but we'll never stop fighting. And I'll always be an advocate for and champion for the taxpayers and the neighborhoods and the neighbors in the Second Ward.
God bless you. You have a very interesting background, and I, again, enjoyed having you on. And incidentally, Gale Sayers is the greatest running back I ever saw in my life.
He was one of the greats. One of the greats.
He was the best. He was full acceleration the minute his hands got on the ball. With Richard Booker, Second Ward Commissioner, this is John Ricciuti, and I hope you found this educational, informative, and entertaining. Thank you, and have a good day.